Good afternoon, folks. It is 4-4. Year of our Lord. It is the 30 greatest saxophone players. I did all the other instruments. I could do like percussion. If you wanted a percussion one, I could do that. That's the only one left that I have more than 30. So, anyway, here's the 30 greatest saxophone players. Which, yeah, jazz is dead, jazz is boring, not a lot of people listen to jazz, not a lot of people review jazz, because it's kind of a niche form of music. But if you care about people technically being good at instruments, if you've actually tried to play instruments yourself, I think that helps a lot. Jazz is kind of for musicians. It's like music for musicians. But yeah, if you've never actually tried to compose and solo, I understand how jazz could sound kind of grating and boring. A sax, especially like an alto or a tenor sax, I can see how that would kind of hurt your ear. That was my experience when I first started listening to jazz. But yeah, if you're unwilling to listen to and get into jazz, then, I don't know why you clicked on this, because saxophone is the prominent melodic instrument in most jazz. It doesn't exist in most other music. It doesn't exist in most rock. So this is basically a list of 30 jazz greats. There's a few exceptions. There's a few people that play in bands, like Fishbone has horns. Amazing band. Morphine, I put Cooley on here. There's a few exceptions, but mainly these are jazz players. And mostly that means they're primarily playing tenor or alto, the great jazz saxophone players. Tenor is like kind of the gold standard. It's like what you think a sax sounds and looks like. Alto is more for like smooth jazz funk. You want to get into that like David Sanborn, Kenny G vibes. It's good for just like wild runs too. So some of the great technical, the Coltranes, the Birds, they will play alto, even though it's hard to keep in tune. It's a very difficult instrument to solo over and to not kind of hit these awkward notes. Makes it all that much more impressive. People who are experts at it, that I will give you a list of. And then baritone and soprano are rarer. Soprano, usually for like the smooth jazz funk type stuff. And baritone obviously is just like bigger and lower. It's more like a tuba. It's just like this big, low. You need to breathe. You need to have fucking lungs of steel to play baritone sax. Anyway, 30 greatest saxophone players of all time, according to me. Number 30, James Chance. I love this guy. I love his sax playing. I love his songwriting. I love his lyrics. I love the whole no wave movement. And yeah, his sax playing is great. I also enjoy the sax on like the pop group record, which reminds me of James Chance. The pop group records. Anyway, number 30. Number 29, Bernie Maupin. Headhunters? Anybody? You enjoy the record by Herbie Hancock and the Headhunters? Perhaps Chameleon or Thrust or Flood? He's an excellent saxophone player. Played on some of the best funk, some of the best jazz fusion. 28, Dexter Gordon. Listen to the record Go. If you haven't heard it yet, you're welcome. Dana Cooley, or Cooley, I don't know how to pronounce it, but Morphine, one of the greatest bands ever. Boston Strong, baby. And with Mark Sandman's bass, there's no guitar, so it's the melodic solo and lead is usually a baritone sax played by this guy. And I love the saxophone on all the Morphine records. I think every Morphine record was a 10. Good, Cure for Pain. yes. I guess the last one they did is maybe not a 10. Anyway, they were one of the greatest bands ever, and he was an instrumental part of it. Dana Coley. 26, James Carter. This is like a current guy who can blow you away. Just kind of like a Coltrane disciple, has a million records, has played on other people's records. James Carter. Just, yeah. I think he played with Snarky Puppy. No, that's Chris Potter. He's up higher. Anyway, 26, James Carter. 25, Carl Denson. Grey Boy All-Stars are an amazing band. I do not like Carl Denson's Tiny Universe. I do not generally care for when he guests with other bands. However, he has one band. This is one of my favorite bands I've ever seen live, which is Grey Boy All-Stars, which is Robert Walter, and just Carl Denson like reined in and just playing like melodic funk, like Maceo riffs. Yeah, it's fantastic. 24, Alice Coltrane. Obviously, John Coltrane was a genius saxophone player. He's very high on the list. Don't worry. Alice Coltrane's music is also incredible. She also hits these kind of like transcendent moments that remind me of her husband. And is just great in her own right. Started like awesome musical school. Has done like a lot of philanthropic work in addition to the fact that she's a great musician. Number 23, Chris Potter. Yeah, just watch his Snarky Puppy solo or just watch him solo. Like he has solo stuff. He's very good. Chris Potter, one of the best living saxophonists. Up there with Bleeding Gums Murphy. 22, Rashawn Rollinkirk. He played on a few classic jazz records, but really why he's this high is because I've seen video where he plays 3 saxophones at once, which is just the stupidest thing ever. But it's great. This dude's got lungs of steel. He can play 3 saxophones at once. Pepper Adams. 21. Best baritone sax, maybe, ever. Just really good. And really that weird baritone sound. Coleman Hawkins kind of invented the way people play tenor sax. He was kind of the OG of that style of the hard bop tenor sax solo. It's kind of the blueprint guy. Jack Schroer. I played on Van Morrison. I love the sax. Listen to the sax solo on Moondance. Yeah, he played that. That's why he's on the list. 18, Scarrick. I like the stuff that he did with, what is it, Charlie something, the guitar player, Charlie Hunter, I think. Anyway, he played on some of those, which were shows that I had that I enjoyed quite a bit. And I liked his kind of wild sax playing. He also does lots of stuff with Les Claypool. Plays in some of his solo outfits. I'm excited to hear Bastard Jazz, the new Claypool project, which will have Scarrick and Stan Moore, amazing New Orleans drummer from Galactic, and Tim Dillon on percussion. I can't imagine that band not being amazing. And they just announced dates in Oakland. Show people who still live in the Bay Area. Miss it sometimes. Okay. Grover Washington, amazing. David Sanborn, amazing. I put Grover 16, David Sanborn 17, because I think they're of a piece in terms of Sanborn's kind of the progeny of Grover. Because Grover's that funky but smooth. And David Sanborn's like taking that corny sax to the Doobie Brothers, Michael McDonald level of cheese. But he's the best. He's like the best of all Kenny G's. Like, if there are infinite numbers of Kenny G's, the quintessential and most important Kenny G is named David Sanborn. Number 15 and number 14 I also connect in my brain. Pharah Sanders and Albert Eiler. These are great free jazz saxophonists. I find free jazz sometimes difficult to listen to. Peter Bronsman's Machine Gun was the album that I heard that made sense out of free jazz to me. So I should have put that saxophone on here, but I didn't. And I'm halfway through the list, so I'm not going to do a whole nother thing. But anyway, listen to that. Listen to Peter Bronsman Octet, European Jazz. Maceo Parker, 13. Played on Parliament Funkadelic Classics. If you've seen him live, he still puts on a fun show. It's funky, it's dancey, it's not boring jazz. This is a jazz show you can take a non-jazz person to, and they'll enjoy themselves. Above him, I put Bobby Keys. He played all those sax solos on the Rolling Stones records, on the John Lennon solo stuff, on a bunch of records that you're like, oh, this sax person plays this great solo. If you look at the liner notes, you'll see that that sax solo was played by Bobby Keys very frequently, if you listen to classic rock. Although he did not play the Money solo. I don't know the guy who played the Money solo, but I respect his jib. I like the cut of it. 10, Sonny Rollins. Saxophone Colossus, next. 9, another Sonny. I put things together in an order. That's what a list is, right? Sonny Stitt. I put him above just because he's from Boston, dude. He's just like Boston's Charlie Parker. And he was the shit. Listen to Sonny Stitt take a solo. Incredible. Cannonball Adderley. Maybe the best tenor saxophonists ever, although Birds plays tenor. I guess they all play all the, like, Coltrane plays tenor, but usually alto, I think, or usually just fucking, yeah, it's tenor or alto. But in terms of whatever, on that kind of blue record, Coltrane's on the alto, Cannonball's on the tenor. I like Cannonball on the tenor. He's a tenor. Wayne Shorter, number 7. Any jazz fusion stuff. Miles Davis's second quintet. Art Blakey and the jazz, like, he's Wayne Shorter. Hopefully you know who Wayne Shorter is. 6, Stan Getz. Stan Getz's style of playing sax is almost like narcotic bliss. It's just, I mean, I know he had a problem with heroin, like most of the great jazz musicians, but his playing is so clean and soulful and beautiful. Just sounds like he's this pure conduit for these just like really tasteful and kind of like lull you into this sense of relaxation type of sax, which is very hard to do. Out of all these great saxophone players, Stan Getz' style, he's like what Bill Evans is to piano, Stan Getz is to sax. It's just like, oh, it's just so tasteful. It's like you barely notice that he's doing a thing. Number 5, exact opposite of that, John Zorn. When I heard Naked City, that record broke my mind because I was starting to listen to jazz and then I was like, oh, you can do crazy jazz that's like mixed with rock and punk and like experimental music, concrete and like death metal, like everything is allowed and you can use saxophones in jazz. Same for, you know, pop group, and James Chance also teach you this thing of like, oh, there's no rules. You can play sax in a rock song. You can, anyway. Also just technically, just blurts out in a way that's just like wild. Sounds like an animal wailing in pain. Which she does better than almost anybody. He does better than anybody that's not named Eric Dolphy. After that, I put Ornette Coleman. Just because I like free jazz. I'm starting to get more of an ear for it and listen to more of it. Shape of Jazz to Come. kind of created the genre of free jazz, and he performed up until he was old. I think he collapsed on stage at Bonnaroo once. I wasn't at that one. I was at one of the other ones, but somebody told me that. I don't know if it was Bonnaroo. Anyway, Ornette Coleman, you invented free jazz. You're number 4. Number 3, Eric Dolphy. I kind of want Eric Dolphy to be number 1. Eric Dolphy is kind of my number 1. What I do is I put my number 1 as the number 3 because 3 is my favorite number, and then I put the 2 people that I'm like, yeah, technically these guys are better. But really Eric Dolphy. Really listen to Out to Lunch. Really listen to Last Date, his last live album. Listen to any Mingus that Dolphy plays on. The way Eric Dolphy plays, and he plays baritone, he also plays clarinet. He would be number 1 in clarinet. He's number 3 in sax. He's quite good. Solo music is quite good. He's an amazing improviser. He deconstructs the form of what a melodic jazz solo can be. There's only 2 people above you, Eric Dolphy. Number 2, John Coltrane. Love Supreme, that's a pretty good record. Blue Train. Anything that he recorded. I could listen to live recordings of him playing the same 4 songs in Japan 10 different ways, and I'd be fine with it. He's just a prodigy. Genius musician. One of the most genius, rule-breaking virtuosos in musical history. One of the most important figures in American musical history. John Coltrane. Only one person I put above him, and that's my boy Charlie Parker on the alto, just fucking wailing endless, but it's always perfect. Charlie Parker, I listen to that Charlie Parker Dizzy Gillespie record, frequently. Anything Parker, it's I understand. It's not hype. This guy was just next level, period. Yeah, and in a thing Django, I don't put as my number 1 guitar player, even though he was ahead of everybody. But Charlie Parker I do, because I still don't think people have really caught up to Charlie Parker. I think people have improved on what Django is doing. Anyway, Hare Krishna, that's 18 minutes.